Intro: the world was never the same. In 2011, a television series arrived that would redefine storytelling forever. A show filled with kings and queens, dragons and betrayal, honor and cruelty. A show that didn't just entertain, it consumed the world. That show was Game of Thrones. From the cold winds of the north to the burning sands of distant lands, millions of viewers were drawn into a universe where no one was safe, not even the heroes. But one question has always lingered. Was Game of Thrones based on a true story, or was it purely fantasy? To answer that, we must go deeper, into history, into imagination, and into the mind of its creator. The man behind the legend. Behind every great world lies a visionary. For Game of Thrones, that visionary was George R.R. Martin. Before dragons and White Walkers, Martin was fascinated by history, especially the brutal, unpredictable nature of medieval Europe. He once said something powerful. "I prefer my history to be messy, because real life is messy." And that philosophy became the foundation of the series. The show itself is based on his book series, A Song of Ice and Fire. But here, where things get interesting. The real history behind the fantasy. While Game of Thrones is filled with magic, much of its politics, betrayals, and wars are inspired by real events. One of the biggest inspirations. Wars of the Roses. This was a brutal conflict in 15th century England between two rival families. House Lancaster, Red Rose. House York, White Rose. Sound familiar? That's because House Stark approximately House York. House Lannister approximately House Lancaster. Just like in the show, families betrayed each other, alliances shifted, and the throne was everything. Kings were overthrown, children were killed, trust meant nothing. In other words, Game of Thrones wasn't exaggerating reality, it was echoing it. Why it felt so real? Unlike typical fantasy stories, Game of Thrones didn't rely on simple good versus evil. Instead, it asked, what if heroes fail? What if villains win? What if power corrupts everyone? Characters like Eddard Stark, Tyrion Lannister, Daenerys Targaryen weren't perfect. They were human. They made mistakes, they paid the price. And sometimes they died. Unexpectedly. Brutally. The shock factor. One of the biggest reasons the show became a global hit was simple. No one was safe. When audiences watched the shocking execution of Ned Stark, it broke a fundamental storytelling rule. The hero died early. And from that moment on, viewers realized, this story plays by no rules. This unpredictability created massive suspense, emotional investment, global discussion. People weren't just watching. They were obsessed. The fantasy element. Now let's address the other side. Yes, Game of Thrones is rooted in history, but it is also deeply fantasy. It includes dragons, White Walkers, magic and prophecy, ancient curses. These elements come purely from imagination. Martin blended real-world brutality, mythological wonder. This combination made the story unique, because it felt both real and impossible. Chapter 6: A Global Cultural Explosion. Game of Thrones didn't just succeed. It became a worldwide cultural phenomenon. It was produced by HBO, but its impact went far beyond TV. It was translated into dozens of languages, watched in nearly every country, discussed on social media daily. It became part of global conversation. Even people who had never watched fantasy got hooked. Why? Because at its core, it wasn't about dragons. It was about power, survival, Humanity. Balance Chapter 7. Power is the real protagonist. In most stories, characters drive the plot. In Game of Thrones, power drives everything. The Iron Throne wasn't just a chair. It was a symbol of control, of ambition, of destruction. Every character wanted it. And in chasing it, they lost themselves. The true enemy. While humans fought each other, a greater threat loomed in the background. Backhand index pointing, right, the White Walkers. They represented something deeper. Death, climate-like destruction, the consequences of ignoring bigger dangers. This parallel made the story even more powerful. Because it reflected real-world issues, backhand index pointing right, humans fighting each other while ignoring global threats. Moral complexity. Game of Thrones refused to give easy answers. Characters weren't fully good, fully evil. Even villains had reasons. Even heroes made terrible choices. For example, Tyrion, a good man, commits questionable acts. Daenerys, a liberator, becomes a destroyer. This moral ambiguity made viewers constantly question. Backhand index pointing right, who should I support? Why it was addictive. The show mastered 3 key elements. 1. Cliffhangers. Every episode left you wanting more. 2. Character depth. Each character felt real and layered. 3. High stakes. Every decision had consequences. This combination made it impossible to stop watching. Was it a true story? So finally the answer. Backhand index pointing right, no. Game of Thrones is not a true story. But backhand index pointing right, it is heavily inspired by real history. Think of it like this. The politics equals real. The violence equals real. The ambition equals real. The dragons equals fantasy. It's a blend of truth and imagination. The controversial ending. Despite its success, the final season divided fans. Some felt it was rushed. Characters changed too quickly. The ending didn't match expectations. But even with criticism, its legacy remained untouchable. Why it will never be forgotten. Game of Thrones wasn't just a show. It was an experience. It proved that storytelling can be brutal, unpredictable, deeply human, and most importantly, it showed that fantasy doesn't need to escape reality. It can reflect it. In the end, Game of Thrones was never about who sits on the throne. It was about what power does to those who chase it.